Right, we're on countdown. Well, that was jazzy music to get us going, folks.
Those glasses.
I wish I brought my sunglasses instead of my brick top glasses. Jeremy, you're muted, which is always good. Welcome, folks, to this episode 2 of our startup session. But I know there's a lot of businesses joining today that are finding it challenging in this in the current world with new jobs, and also managing the peaks and troughs of being candidate rich and job rich, and then or candidate poor and then job rich. So I've gathered together today some wonderful people that happen to be team partners and coordinators and members. We've got Jeremy Snell, who's our learning and development ambassador. Been working with Jeremy for getting on for 15 years now. Many of you will know he's an extraordinary trainer in the recruitment space. And I've got two, one long established, but not old, of course, Claire, member of team who's been job sharing and creating real values for her own business and other people's businesses for over a dozen years now. And I think in your best year, you shared £80,000 worth of, or made £80,000 worth of additional revenue, didn't you, Claire?
Yeah.
With working with other members. And Matt, you're a relatively new kid on the block with team, but you bought into that collaboration and job sharing thing, and it's really helped you in that dodgy market back in 24. So I'm going to come to you with some stories and understand what it's like to get involved with the community, because that can be quite fearful for recruiters actually working with other recruiters, which seems a slight anomaly. Jeremy, I'm going to come to you first and ask you some questions. These have been tough times. What you deal with a host of clients, and you're helping nurture them and their sales teams through some tricky times. What's working and what's not? Have you got any do's and don'ts that you could share with our audience today?
Yeah, well, look, do has got to be do something, right? If you're not doing something, you're either thinking about it, talking about it, and none of that is doing something. If you do something every day that is designed to create outreach, trigger a conversation, book a meeting, make a call, every day you are doing something, you're far more likely to find that you'll create an outcome. And if every day you do something, you build on something called the compound effect that Matt will know I was sharing at the team meeting this week. Do 5 things every day, nothing other than good things will happen every day that you do it, because the sum of all of the 5 things starts to create mass. And then in terms of what you do with that, the clearer you can define in your own business. For my business, what is the definition of a lead? And when you know what a lead looks like, and you know what your process is to be able to engage with a lead, to turn it into a meeting, to then turn it into a customer, those are the things to do every day. So on the back of that, Simon, probably the don'ts. Don't catch yourself spending so much time worrying about things, complaining about things, moaning about things. There's a time and a place for that. It's like a little vent. What it should create, therefore, is a commitment as to what you want to change. And then what you want to change needs to start to look like a plan. So much of it, Simon, actually, on the do and the don't, it all begins with mindset.
Yeah. No, and be positive, optimistic, and always continue to be ambitious. But we might have a few startups that have joined us today. So I've got some kickoff questions for you all, and feel free to jump in. And quite a lot of the startups will be under restricted covenant. They've come out of another employment agency where they've been a member of the team, but not an owner. And they will have 6 months wrapped up with certainly not talking to clients, sometimes not talking to candidates too. So I just think, what's the first thing you'd advise someone to do when trying to build a fresh client pipeline, especially if you're under a restricted covenant? And feel free to jump in, folks.
I mean, I suppose from a team perspective, you've got the team exchange, which is where that can be the origin for brand new people into team to sort of try and suss out where they think they can help another recruiter out, right? So you could be, recruitment is broadly the same across industry, give or take the nuances of understanding the skill set. But, if you've worked in accounting and finance, you might be able to scuttle across sideways to go into insurance, for example, or for whatever reason, or you might just completely reinvent yourself and go, right, I know how to recruit people. I know how to shortlist people when I've got a job spec. So then you just kind of initial contact, you look on Team Exchange, you designate which jobs you think you're going to be able to add value to, or the sectors that you think you can have a bash at that are outside of your regular sort of sector. And then follow up with those people first of all. But obviously don't just make that initial contact on Team Exchange and wait for those people to come back to you, because we're all recruiters, we're all busy, right? So when I first joined back end of last summer, it was very much a case of Team Exchange was my starting point. But then if I really thought I could help somebody out because that job was my particular sweet spot, I'd then follow up with that person, or do what all good recruiters do, track them down on LinkedIn and also on the Team General Hub, sent them multiple different types of connection requests, and then was quite proactive but persistent in following up with those other agencies that have got the vacancies that I thought I could help out with. So that's the kind of the formal team answer, if you like, in terms of using what's already there as a bit of a resource. And then depending on which WhatsApp groups you get yourself allocated to or asked to get put into when you join the network, then there's the informal channel there where lots of recruiters are either talking about, I've got candidates XYZ with these particular skill sets, could anybody use them? And either it's just because you're trying to help somebody out, or it's because you want to do a split in terms of having a prospective candidate for somebody to utilize. But then also there are other jobs within those groups sometimes, and obviously that's a lot more informal, I get that. And then I think also when you're on various sector team calls or Zoom calls, the amount of business I've placed one guy off literally following up with someone in the chat whilst I was on a Zoom call for solos. So he and I then arranged to have a meeting the next day, and now we filled jobs together, and now we're working on jobs again. That was just me being proactive and following up from that meeting. So I think you can do all those different channels, but you don't just join team and expect it all to come to you. I think, Simon, you mentioned to me when I first joined, you've got to be kind of proactive. You've got to go after it. So you've got to treat these other agencies as if they're your clients, essentially.
Yeah.
So that's what I'd say. That's how I approach it.
And I think, as Jeremy would say to people, be curious. You're recruiters. Yeah. And ask questions. And if go to outreach. Claire knows probably 20 recruiters within team. She's built a community up of people she's worked with over the years. But if you're brand new and this is all new to you, you've got to knock on some doors, haven't you, and introduce yourself and showcase your skills so that you build that trust. And once that trust is there, that community follows. Jeremy or Claire, anything to add to that, specifically with regard to new pipeline and potentially working either in a very tricky market or under restricted covenant?
Well, the one thing I would say is that, especially if you've got restricted covenants, I would use whatever social media you have, LinkedIn, for example, to add value so that your clients don't think you've disappeared. Because a restricted covenant, is very difficult to enforce. You'd have to get a client to go to court and say they poached me. It's difficult to enforce, and obviously no one wants to go down that route of getting sued. But if those clients that you've already had that know you can see you're active on LinkedIn and you're adding value and you're talking about interview techniques or a different role that you're working on with the team person that you maybe advertise, they can see you're active, then at least you haven't lost that part of your business. They can and they can come to you. Your old clients can still come to you. There's nothing to say they can't come to you. You just can't go to them.
Yeah, there's a slight warning. There's 3 types of restricted covenants, and there are some where clients, and they lay it down that you can't talk to or have conversations or deal with any of your clients stroke candidates within a period of time. It's usually 6 months. But there are some that say you can't approach your clients or candidates within 6 months. But so it's worth having a look at those, the T's and C's in some detail. And fortunately, we've got some legal partners in team that could give you some free advice on that. Just to go over your restricted covenant, because if like Claire said, if you're out there being visible and those clients approach you and you've got I mustn't approach those old clients covenant, then it's perfectly legal to work with those people without risking a court case. But let's not get negative about court cases.
No.
Jeremy, anything to add before we? You've been in court many times, of course.
Yeah, less about restrictive covenants though, Simon.
Yeah.
In that way, I am quite good. I think the word restrictive can sometimes hinder how you perceive what you can do in the first few months when you start. I actually think that there is a big opportunity if you're under a restrictive covenant, because you're going to have to talk to people you've not done business with before. You're going to have to start to do some what I would call real selling. And if you simply sit and wait for the restrictive covenant to be over, or you act as if you have been restricted, your whole mindset has changed. I see it as being an enablement covenant, because you may have been working in an agency that had, 15% of the clients in their portfolio. You've got 85% you can still go and talk to. And by the time the covenant's over, you may not need all of those customers to actually help you to have the business that you want to have. And let's be honest, maybe some of those customers, you wanted to leave them behind anyway. So,
on that as well, Jeremy, there may be customers that the original agency turned the business away because it didn't fit their fee profile, or they were too small or too niche or too specialist, and they just went after the larger accounts that were always going to keep them the volume. So there might have been some niche bits that they could pick off anyway, though, that they'd actually turned away. And in that case, if they've turned it away, again, as you said, it's an opportunity for you to go, well, I used to work here, so you've got the brand recognition of where you used to work. But then I've been trained up and I know what I'm doing, but I've gone on my own, and this is what I'm doing. And then again, that opens up the doors in that way. Yeah,
there's definitely more opportunity than restriction.
Now, I've got some questions for you individually that I pulled together. One for you, Claire. In a tough market, how has Team Exchange helped your pipeline and delivery?
Well, quite a lot. To put it in perspective, if people don't know me, I've been with Team for years and years and years and years, probably 28 years-ish. And initially I joined Team because I was very young, started my own business, and actually having a bit of support and a bit of a social aspect was what I really needed. But in the last probably 10 years, Team members have helped me an awful lot with a global consultancy where I've had multiple roles, which is when I shared 160 grand one year. And then post-COVID, that consultancy's requirements completely changed. So it was like my right arm got cut off. But then it turned around the other way. So now I've been doing the candidate sourcing for team members. And to be fair, it's been a lifeline, whilst in the meantime, I've had to get my head around starting to do business development again, which I haven't done in a gazillion years. So it's been quite tough, but it means that I've also had to go out my comfort zone and probably go back into sectors that I used to do as a commercial agency. Because I've focused in IT for a long time, and I will always keep going back to that. But I've worked on marketing, accounts, started to pivot into law. So it's just opened up. It's opened up doors. It's also opened up different pockets of business that I wouldn't have even considered before. And it's built relationships. And now, because I had to do exactly what Matt said and pick up the phone and speak to people and say, "Can I give you a hand on this?" that I haven't worked with before. And for example, I had a call yesterday from a team member who I placed 2 people with in the last few months, saying, "Can you help me with this one?" And that's another sales role. So it has been a lifeline, but in more ways than one, not just financially, but also I think, support, the social aspect, the discounts you can get for job posting, the advice you get from different people, if you're looking for a CMS system.
I don't need you to sell team today.
No,
This is
that's what's helped me in a difficult market. You know what I mean? All those kind of things really helped.
I think you touched on something there I was going to ask you about, and it is quite tough being a solo recruiter, isn't it? You've been in an agency, you're bouncing off other people, you're learning and you're teaching as well, and the osmosis of an office is quite energetic, and then you're on your own, and you're spinning all the plates of business development, resourcing, finance and accounting for your own business, marketing, and then credit control and all the other things. So there's quite a lot of pressure, and Jeremy said it earlier: distraction, not to do business development. And I was going to ask what it's like as a solo, having that support of when you've got jobs but no candidates but no jobs. It's that one place you can even out those sales delivery, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, I think, obviously the spine of team is the job exchange bit, one way or the other. So the first bit of business I did when I joined was someone else I was introduced to on one of the very first engineering calls I did with Ruth Forster, was introducing me to another team member who then found a candidate for a live job that I had. And I was like, well, stone me, I was supposed to join team to do the sourcing for other people, not the other way around. But ultimately, you still split the fee, so it's still the same difference, right?
Yeah.
So I think the spine of that, as you say, that's the main bit of it. But I think where it can even itself out is, in an ideal world for me personally, if I'm busy with my own stuff and then I can just top up the odd bit with some team stuff with, connections I've made or people I've worked with in the past, that's fantastic. Or, as Claire experienced and described a few years ago, she was so busy, or if I get so busy that I go out to other team members I know and I trust that can support me, well, that's also a great position to be in. And then the stuff away from the spine and the core of team and what makes it so attractive, as you say, you've got the support network of other people going, well, I've got this problem, or I've got this particular client, how do I do this, or how do I do that? All the kind of peripheral stuff, that's the support bit. And, Jeremy's training, once a month in terms of, have you thought about this? The in-person training that he gave us at the Midlands meeting the other day when we were in Coventry again. There's always ideas and approaches and tactics that we could all be doing. We all sit here. We don't all have it all sussed out and, 100% sorted by any means. So I think that's where team, as well as the core tenet of what it's all about, that's where the extra stuff, all the extra add-ons, that kind of community and other people's ideas, or Jeremy's training, or going back into the team hub and looking at the recordings of the training that's been done by Jeremy and others and all the rest of it before. That's where it's helpful as well, because it's just giving you new ideas or new approaches. I know
you're overselling. I want to talk about pipelines now.
Yeah, but that's it. But I think you can have a pipeline of, you could be, when you're speaking to new team members. I was chatting to John Doherty a few weeks ago. He was talking about a particular client that he might have some stuff coming up with, but I called him up in advance of those jobs just to see if we like each other or not, or if he likes me enough to think, well, he seems all right, I'll register some jobs with it. Or I've spoken to other people in the Midlands region who historically have dealt with Wagstaff. Well, I'm not then going to call that person and say bad things about a potential competitor formally. But I'm like, look, yeah, they're great. But if you ever need anything in addition to what they're doing, then I also do the same kind of stuff. So I could help you out. So I'm not trying to offer myself as an alternative, but sometimes you've got to do that kind of initial contact piece. As you would with your clients, as Jeremy talked about the other day, you've got to be in touch with these people umpteen times before they decide if they're going to talk to you, let alone give you some business. Similarly,
No, you've got that's right.
You've got to treat the other fellow recruiters as your clients as well. But equally, the better thing with team is they're your clients that understand you because they're also a fellow recruiter. So that's where it's marginally easier.
I think the other thing when you're solo as well is I have a couple of people, and Simon, you often recommend they do this when they're going on holiday. That's always a good thing when you're a solo. If you've got someone with a good relationship and then a job lands on your desk, is you can pick up the phone to someone. I've had quite a few people do this to me. Claire, have you got capacity? I'm going away for 2 weeks. So I can then work the role. They might coordinate the emails and still deal with the client. Somebody else actually introduced me to the client to deal with it whilst he was away. So things like that are really beneficial when you are a solo recruiter. Yeah,
that's a great point, and I'd forgotten that, Claire. I'm going to come to Jeremy again. With fill rates aren't good in the UK market, are they, Jeremy? So I think job sharing is good. But before, I'm not going to ask you about that so much now. How can new recruiters leverage some of the stuff you do already, the learning and networking resources to accelerate their success in their first year? You've been, bless your heart, you've now given us 18 months worth of free training every single month. And that's made a hell of a difference to quite a few of our members who have survived through what was some very tricky times in 2024. But what have you seen that people have really latched onto and they've responded to? We drip fed you for 18 months, and I think it's really begun to put some process into people's. But I just wondered your perspective on that and what you've seen that's really worked.
I think what really works is when those who are members of team start to see that L&D is actually fuel for their business rather than trying to fix problems. And when they start to see it as being a fuel, you consume it differently because you're looking for something that you can do something with quickly to enhance your business, how you operate. And when you go out looking for fuel, strengthening a weakness is longer than improving a strength. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So if you know what you're already good at, you know what your skill set is, you know what your value proposition is, go and look for L&D that actually helps you to be able to enhance that and lean into it. Because right now it is tough, you know. So some of the things that I see people doing that really works is just the rhythm with which they keep turning up to the L&D sessions. Turn up to the L&D, pay attention, and do one thing because of it. And if you do something with the content, that's the time that the learning begins. If you keep ad hoc attending training sessions, like I don't want to sound critical of team, it's been oversold. You've already said stop selling it. The downside is, right, there's a downside to it. When you can turn up for what is free training, you don't really have that much skin in the game if you consider it to be something you're turning up to opportunistically because it was free. And you still might write a load of notes, but you're not paying full attention to how you're going to turn it into behavior because you didn't trade anything in the moment other than time. The people who get the most out of it decide this is the behavioral change or improvement that I intend to make that is just one thing. When we did the session on speccing, everyone in recruitment the world over knows exactly what speccing is. It doesn't mean that they do it very well, and it doesn't mean that they do it consistently. And if you do something inconsistently, you probably don't do it as well as you could because there's not enough practice. Some people turned up for that and went, yeah, I know this, and then didn't change. Other people turned up and went, I'm going to do that with a little bit more attention. And they're the ones who are in the WhatsApp group saying, bloody hell, it worked. because they did something, do you know? So yeah, I don't know if that helps anyone. You know, training isn't about being broken. Training isn't about being stuck. It's about finding the inspiration and the fuel to then have enough momentum to be willing to go and do one thing.
Yeah. But professional footballers train 3 or 4 times a week. They're brilliant at what they do, but they know that training enhances and maintains it and enhances it as well. So I don't. You and Hisham did some great research, Jeremy, Hisham Azuz, on what people were doing right across the marketplace, didn't you?
Yeah,
and it would be good to get a couple of nuances from that, the feedback you had for the companies that really invested in L&D and some of the outcomes they had, because those that dipped in as and when they thought they needed it tended to have not quite the required results. But have you got any insights into that? Because I think it was a really powerful research.
Yeah, the big things that came from it was 62% of businesses had people who were employed in their business who were behind target, and the number of people who were behind target in their business was greater than 50%. And as the business got bigger, obviously what they're carrying is larger. And 42% of businesses hadn't spent any money on training.
Yeah.
You know, just the two things, and you can see that you need to generate some money to be able to make an investment to then be able to bring things, but you can get caught in a cycle of we don't have enough money to do the training. Because we're not doing the training, people aren't able to hit their targets consistently, and because they're not hitting their targets consistently, we're now caught in sometimes a downward spiral, which is why I think we saw headcounts and recruitment businesses reduce, because it started to be seen as a cost, when actually L&D is an investment in the business. It's an investment in the engine. It's back to it being fuel.
Yeah, it is, and I'm completely with you there. The biggest asset you have in your business, and probably your biggest cost if you're employing people, is those individuals. And if someone's doing 125k on perm a year, and with training they can give you 200 to 250, and I'm using that analogy because that's exactly what you did to some of my juniors, didn't you, Jeremy? Back when I ran Principal People, we invested in those youngsters and we made them hugely successful, very well paid, very well rewarded, and contributing a huge amount to the business, without actually pushing their base salaries up hardly at all. It was all about commission. And in those days when if you earn 250,000, you can earn, if you deliver 250,000, you can take home a third of that. That was our sort of plan. I'm going to go back to some other questions to our wonderful guests. I've got one. I'm going to Matt. Let me see here. You've tapped into 100. Matthew, as someone actively growing through Team and Team Exchange, how have you tapped into the 100K's worth of weekly job opportunities? I mention that now because I looked, as some of you know, I'm on holiday down in lovely Dorset, and the weather is gorgeous. I'm glad I did staycation. But I checked on Team Exchange before I came on. There's £122,000 worth of jobs. There's only 17 new jobs this week, but 122, all UK jobs. A couple of Claires in there. Are you tapping into that regularly, Matt, or are you nurturing and developing the community you've already developed privately?
I would probably say there's a mixture of the two, because I've been in team for more than sort of 6 months now. I've already got some links into kind of people that I've done business with previously. So as I mentioned, I've got a returning relationship that's yielded 5 first interviews this week. is already going to then generate one of my candidates is going to go through to a second. I've got other existing teamwork that I'm doing at the moment that kind of came off the back of either that initial nurture piece 6 months ago when I very first joined. But I still think I've always got the tab and I've got the rules going into my inbox, so that if there are things that I've designated as jobs that I'm interested in, I'm going to keep an eye on those. But then also, like at the Midlands meeting the other day, there was a couple of guys there who've recently joined team from Elevation People. They're based in Coventry. They're also in the engineering manufacturing space. I'd already spoken to them when they very first joined them on one of these solo Zoom calls, or the engineering Zoom calls, I think it was, just to say, oh, I've got this job. If you're in Coventry and I've got this client who's in Leamington Spa, maybe we could do something there, have a look at this job spec, so what you can do. So I think for me now, I'd probably say that I'm a bit more established. Obviously, I'm on here today, which is also a bit of pro Blueberry Resourcing and Matt Richards marketing, of course, so people know who I am a bit more, who haven't, already encountered me on either conferences or meetings or whatever. But I'm probably dipping in and out. I'm probably being a bit more selective now, because sometimes once you've got so many jobs that you're working on, right, we all get to a particular capacity. So at the moment, there's an element of some of those jobs are my jobs, some of those jobs are team jobs. I don't want to then devalue how useful I could be to somebody else by doing lots of things. But I think as newbies who are joining team, as I said, you do one of two things. Well, you do the process. You look at Team Exchange. You have the proactive watchdog set up so that jobs that you think you can do or add value to, they're coming into your inbox. And then it's just a process. It's 5-10 minutes a day just to quickly go, oh, what emails have come in this morning, or proactively search on Team Exchange in much the same way as if we are sourcing candidates. We all log into LinkedIn, right? We all logged into the job boards that we've got subscriptions to see what watchdogs have come through that day, or what new candidates have been registered. It's the same analogy, I think. You've got to be proactive. So if you're just doing a little bit of that every day in the first place, as you said, if it's restrictive covenants, you can widen the net and the scope of what you can look at. So I think you've always got to keep doing it. Just like Jeremy said a moment ago about the training, you don't go, right, I've done some training or I've done some BD stuff and now I've got some results coming in, now I'm going to stop. Well, that's surely the definition of madness. You've got to always keep topping it up, I think, a little bit. So I don't think any of us would ever think we've ever got team sorted, you've ever got your desk or your business sorted. You've always got to be proactively topping up. So I think there's multiple strands you've got to follow up, but Team Exchange is the good starting point. And then alongside that, you're going to be nurturing relationships with recruiters you think you can help out. And then you've got the emails coming in proactively, so you can just look at them, discard them, or go into a bit more detail. And then you're going to have the cadence of, well, I'm sure I spoke to Claire a few months ago. She mentioned something that was going to come up in August. Maybe I'll give her a buzz because I haven't spoken to Claire for a while, just to see what's going on with that company. Because it's my job sometimes as a potential resourcing partner to keep reminding other team members of what I can do for them. It's not their job to remember what I do, if I can put it like that.
Yeah.
So I think,
you are competing. You're competing with 500 other resources. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think all those different strands, you've got to do a lot of, a lot of little bits of everything, I think.
Okay. I'm going to remind Claire of something she told me a few years ago when you were delivering so many jobs to other team members. I think this is about fill rate, and you were quite unselfish, I think, at the time. You said you were putting nearly all of your jobs on Team Exchange from the word go, and collaborating the best candidates for your client, and you weren't particularly bothered whether it was your candidate or another member's candidate that would fill a job, as long as you were supporting that client really well. And if it was 50% revenue, so be it. As long as the client continued to get a consistent level of really good candidates, and I think that's a mistake that other people make when they start collaborating. They work a job for a few weeks, and then when they've exhausted all their resources and frustrated potentially their client, they then push the job out to other members or Team Exchange, and it's got a bit rusty. It's got a bit old. So because you jumped in, Claire, didn't you, and just put the jobs on straight away? What was the strategy for that?
I still do that now. So whenever I get a new role, I always post on my job boards and all the bits that I use, and it goes straight on Team. I've just always And I think it was probably off the back of all those roles that I had and I needed volume.
Yeah.
Because I've always had that mindset that I'd rather fill it. I don't want to risk waiting and my resources don't work. I'd rather pull in other people, and I genuinely will put their candidates forward. I don't think, right, I'm going to hold on to them, see if I've got any good ones. I don't. I just literally find the best people, and I still do that now. I do understand why people will hold off, and wait. But the only issue with that is exactly what you said. You're then going in and trying to exhaust a candidate resources that maybe they've already been spoken to. And I think, although having said that, often you will have different reaches to different people, or they'll respond to you and they haven't responded to the other recruiter. It swings and roundabouts, but I've always worked like that, and it just gives me the security that I know I've done everything I can to make sure I can fill it.
Yeah. I was going to ask Jeremy another question, but Jeremy, here's one that I thought of earlier. What coaching strategies have you seen help people overcome challenges with restricted covenants or startup? And it doesn't matter whether because it is a different ball game. I've seen some really good recruiters start a business in the same market that they've been in. They've been superb recruiters for, but all of a sudden they're thinking about their brand, their new name, their website. They're perhaps working with a different CRM that they're not quite used to, and if they've got some temp or contract, they've signed up an umbrella and they get distracted by all this other stuff. What advice can you give a startup or to just focus on doing the stuff they did really well for their previous employer and really drive some revenue into their business?
Yeah, there's probably a few threads with that, Simon, that they have to acknowledge the fact that although they bring a lot of experience and capability and reasons why a client would want to do business with them, they are also by design a startup. So therefore you need to do some of the work that perhaps you did at the very beginning when you joined recruitment that got you established in the first place. And that requires having a really clear plan of how do I intend to win my first client? What business is it that I'm looking to secure, and how can I make that happen quickly? So the desire to have the business ready, that's the thing that creates the distraction, because if I'm waiting until everything is ready to then go and do the business development, it's still going to take time for the business development to start to produce something for me. So day number one and every day moving forward, it doesn't have to be the full day, but if I allocate 60 minutes every day to do something which is business development, I've still got 7 hours to do all of the other things. It's if I get over consumed by all of the other things, my attention is put into the nice to haves that are also important to haves, but they're not necessarily going to make the first customer turn up. Does that make sense? Yeah. I'll make the first customer turn up. And if that takes me 60 minutes a day, 90 minutes a day, it's the discipline with which I allocate the time to do what some people might consider to be the grubby work, the oily bit of the job, right? Everyone likes doing the shop window piece, but actually doing some of the grubby work early means that we're less stressed in 3 months when we're starting to realize the savings are dwindling, and now the pressure's on to generate some business, because then we compromise our own standards and we'll pick up work that perhaps we wouldn't have worked on in a previous life, or pick up work that we wouldn't have worked on if we'd have been less close to the end of the nest egg. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, most certainly.
Set some standards.
Good. Yeah. I'm going to ask all of you questions to fill in. If someone, and this is for all of you, if someone could only focus on 3 actions, you've got to think about more than, and you can each of you can give one if you can't think of three. So we get at least three for our attendees today. If someone could only focus on 3 actions in their first 30 days, or it could be 60 days, to build pipeline and win new clients, what should they be?
Well, for me, I think it's adding value. I never would post on LinkedIn. I've got 20,000 connections, which has probably gone up just over the years of being on LinkedIn. I've never posted ever in my whole life. Well, probably have, but years ago. I know, it's terrible, isn't it? Well, because I never needed to.
It's a terrible admission for a recruiter, but there we go. Don't worry about that.
But when you realise you've got to start developing business, then that's what I had to do. I had to be a bit more out there. I had to be present and add value, and that's what. So I would recommend. It's a very slow process, but it's consistency, and if you're consistently adding value so people can see you and they get to know you, and that's a good way of starting to build business. Because you'll be recognized then, and if you do approach someone, they might have, and you connect with them and you're adding value and they can see stuff in your feed, then it's going to gain their trust a bit, and it will help build those clients.
I was going to say, really invest in your profile on LinkedIn, because that's where your community lives, and you can reach out to them and tell people what's changed in your world, and if you're in one of those restricted covenants that stops you approaching clients, but it doesn't stop them approaching you, that's a great place to let them know that you've started your new business. This is your focus, this is your brand, this is your niche. And they go, well, that's exactly what I need now. That's a good tip. Be present, I would say. Matt, I'm going to put you under pressure. Have you got one or two?
I've got 3 fairly standard answers. Okay, so sometimes we, as recruiters, grumble about we've got too many candidates and not enough jobs for them. So if I was my first 30 or 60 days, I would look at who are the available candidates or most placeable candidate, MPC, whatever acronyms you use. And then I would use that candidate or candidates, and I would look to package those up with 2 or 3 opportunities per however many candidates I was working on, and go to market with an actual, so you are metaphorically door to door knocking and doing BD, but you have a candidate who you've done a proper candidate interview with. So you've got a proper summary to discuss verbally or via LinkedIn or on email to then see if that client is looking to recruit at that point in time. And then it's the standard recruitment stuff. Right, there's the hierarchy. Have I hit the jackpot? Yes, they've got a vacancy. Yes, they want to interview. Okay, well, that's very much a classroom scenario. The reality is, yes, they're interesting, but not right now today. Okay, well, who else can they put me in touch with? And then that way you've got a proper kind of old school, I would call it, bit of business development going along. So I would be doing something like that, because if you've got a couple of candidates or candidates that you can do, you can market and package those candidates up. If a candidate then has got 2 or 3 interviews through you as their new recruiter, well, hopefully they're not going to go elsewhere, because you're doing a pretty stand-up job for that candidate. So that would be one aspect of what I would do. And then I suppose tied in with that, I would then look at strategic business development, but looking at who are the profiles, or what were the profiles of clients that I've previously recruited for? What traits did those clients exhibit? Okay, I'm now going to do some research, not too much, because as you said, you've got to be getting money in the door. But I'm going to look at the characteristics and the profile of those ideal clients in my current roster or my previous roster that I can't touch for a number of months. And regardless of the industry, if you're going outside of it because of restricted covenants, look at those kinds of profiles of companies. So you might use some AI tools to help you out with sort of shortlisting and identifying top 10 clients. And then those are the clients that you then try and warm up, either with a proactive candidate, prospective candidate sat in, or you're just doing those multiple contact points, as Jeremy has touched on previously, in terms of getting in front of them. So at least they know who you are and can talk about what you're doing. So I'd be doing that kind of direct stuff. And then my third point was going to be, if you're in team, then you would leverage the team stuff, as we've discussed already. Team exchange, follow up with the jobs you think you can do. Make sure you've got the job alerts that you think you can help out with. into your inbox on a regular basis. Attend as many of the regular Zoom calls as possible, because then again, you're nurturing another potential pipeline of potential business that you could work on. So there you go. That's my 3 tips that I'd be considering.
Thank you, Matt. That was good. Really, really good stuff. Jeremy, you got a tough ship now. They've given some great advice. Did they steal any of your thunder in that, or have you got something you can add?
I would follow a habit stack. So I would meet 3 good candidates every week, because if I'm meeting 3 good candidates every week, either in real life or at least having a video conference type thing, so that there is a little bit more connectivity, 3 of those a week, and then twice a week I would post on LinkedIn about the candidates that I've met, specifically focusing on the stories that they've shared about the outcomes that they've generated, so I can show the world that I know what a good candidate can do. And then once per week, I would take the best of the 3 out to market as a spec. So that's like 3 things, 2 things, 1 thing that feeds the next and feeds the next. So as long as I do the 3 candidate meetings, I've then got the content for my 2 posts, and I've then got the content for my candidate marketing.
That's a great idea. I just tell a little anecdote of a story. We used to have a client that was in health and safety consultancy, fire risk consultancy. So they used to work with lots of property, construction businesses. Matt, they're not far from you, Matt. I'm not going to say who they are. But their EVP wasn't great, and they used to work their people fairly hard. So we used to track all of their candidates on our job boards. So as soon as they put any of their staff went to the job boards, because we were looking at CV Library, Total, and Read and stuff. So we get an alert if any of them went, and we'd start to have conversations with the MD and the ops director saying, "How's things going with your business now?" Because these guys were going to leave, So and I would think each year we filled 4 or 5 vacancies with them by just knowing that they were going to have a vacancy very soon, and it would trigger. We saw a CV on the job board from one of their staff. We'd start to have a conversation with the client again about how's things happening. Is retention still good? Are you worried about any of your team? And it was fuel to the fire. It was wonderful. Fuel. I use the fuel analogy, Jeremy. Thank you. I think we can wrap up now. I don't know if we've got any questions for the panel. I don't know whether I've seen any come in. Jahisha has put lots of different stuff in there. You're welcome to. I think all of your profiles have been put in the slot, so people might come and ask you some questions directly, and I really welcome that. I'd just like to wrap up by saying thank you, Matt. Thank you, Jeremy.
No
thank
problem.
you for all you do for our wonderful community and helping people on their journey. And a great second session for our startup program. So enjoy the weather. Have a wonderful weekend, everyone, and look forward to seeing you guys soon.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. See you later. Take care. Bye.
See you. Bye.
Bye.